Ci sono ragioni per essere ottimisti? Quante ne conosciamo? Voglio condividere con voi questo video che parla dell'11ª ragione per essere ottimisti e potremmo dargli veramente ragione. Guardate con attenzione.
When I was president of the American Psychological Association, they tried to media train me. And an encounter I had with CNN summarizes what I'm going to be talking about today, which is the 11th reason to be optimistic. The editor of Discover told us 10 of them. I'm going to give you the 11th. So they came to me, CNN, and they said, Professor Seligman, would you tell us about the state of psychology today? We'd like to interview you about that. And I said, great. He said, but this is CNN, so you only get a soundbite. So, well, how many words do I get? I said, well, one. Cameras rolled, and she said, Professor Seligman, what is the state of psychology today? Good. Cut. That won't do. We'd really better give you a longer soundbite. Well, how many words do I get this time? Well, you get 2. Dr. Seligman, what is the state of psychology today? Not good. Look, Dr. Seligman, we can see you're really not comfortable in this medium. We'd better give you a real soundbite. This time you can have 3 words. And, Professor Seligman, what is the state of psychology today? Not good enough. In our rush to do something about people in trouble, in our rush to do something about repairing damage, it never occurred to us to develop interventions to make people happier, positive interventions. So that was not good. And so that's what led people like Nancy Etkoff, Dan Gilbert, Mike Csikszentmihalyi, and myself to work in something I call positive psychology, which has 3 aims. The first is that psychology should be just as concerned with human strength as it is with weakness. It should be just as concerned with building strength as with repairing damage. It should be interested in the best things in life, and it should be just as concerned with making the lives of normal people fulfilling and with genius, with nurturing high talent. So, in the last 10 years, and the hope for the future, we've seen the beginnings of a science of positive psychology, a science of what makes life worth living. It turns out that we can measure different forms of happiness, and any of you for free can go to that website and take the entire panoply of tests of happiness. You can ask, how do you stack up for positive emotion, for meaning, for flow, against literally tens of thousands of other people. We created the opposite of the diagnostic manual of the insanities, a classification of the strengths and virtues that looks at the sex ratio, how they're defined, how to diagnose them, what builds them and what gets in their way. We found that we could discover the causation of the positive states, the relationship between left hemispheric activity and right hemispheric activity as a cause of happiness. I've spent my life working on extremely miserable people, and I've asked the question, how do extremely miserable people differ from the rest of you? And starting about 6 years ago, we asked about extremely happy people, and how do they differ from the rest of us? And it turns out there's one way, very surprising, they're not more religious, they're not in better shape, they don't have more money, they're not better looking, they don't have more good events and fewer bad events. The one way in which they differ, they're extremely social. They don't sit in seminars on Saturday morning. They don't spend time alone. Each of them is in a romantic relationship, and each has a rich repertoire of friends. But watch out here. This is merely correlational data, not causal, and it's about happiness in the first Hollywood sense I'm going to talk about. Happiness of ebullience and giggling and good cheer. And I'm going to suggest to you that's not nearly enough in just a moment. I believe there are three different, and I call them different because different interventions build them. It's possible to have one rather than the other. Three different happy lives. The first happy life is the pleasant life. This is a life in which you have as much positive emotion as you possibly can, and the skills to amplify it. The second is a life of engagement, a life in your work, your parenting, your love, your leisure. Time stops for you. That's what Aristotle was talking about. And third, the meaningful life. So I want to say a little bit about each of those lives and what we know about them. The first life is the pleasant life, and it's simply, as best we can find it, it's having as many of the pleasures as you can, as much positive emotion as you can, and learning the skills, savoring mindfulness, that amplify them, that stretch them over time and space. But the pleasant life has three drawbacks, and it's why positive psychology is not happyology, and why it doesn't end here. The first drawback is that it turns out the pleasant life, your experience of positive emotion, is heritable, about 50% heritable, and in fact, not very modifiable. So the different tricks that Mathieu and I and others know about increasing the amount of positive emotion in your life are 15 to 20% tricks, getting more of it. Second is that positive emotion habituates. It habituates rapidly, indeed. It's all like French vanilla ice cream. The first taste is 100%. By the time you're down to the sixth taste, it's gone. And as I said, it's not particularly malleable. And this leads to the second life. And I have to tell you about my friend Len to talk about why positive psychology is more than positive emotion, more than building pleasure. In two of the three great arenas of life, by the time Len was 30, Len was enormously successful. The first arena was work. By the time he was 20, he's an options trader. By the time he was 25, he was a multimillionaire and the head of an options trading company. Second, in play, he's a national champion bridge player. And but in the third great arena of life, love, Len is an abysmal failure. And the reason he was that Len is a cold fish. Len is an introvert. American women said to Len when he dated them, "You're no fun. You don't have positive emotion. Get lost." And Len was wealthy enough to be able to afford a Park Avenue psychoanalyst who for 5 years tried to find the sexual trauma that had somehow locked positive emotion inside of him. But it turned out there wasn't any sexual trauma. It turned out that Len grew up in Long Island and he played football and watched football and played bridge. Len is in the bottom 5% of what we call positive affectivity. So the question is Len unhappy? And I want to say not. Contrary to what psychology told us about the bottom 50% of the human race in positive affectivity, I think Len is one of the happiest people I know. He's not consigned to the hell of unhappiness, and that's because Len, like most of you, is enormously capable of flow. When he walks onto the floor of the American Exchange at 9:30 in the morning, time stops for him, and it stops till the closing bell. When the first card is played, till 10 days later, the tournament is over, time stops for Len. Third path is meaning. This is the most venerable of all the happinesses traditionally. And meaning in this view consists of, very parallel to eudaimonia, it consists of knowing what your highest strengths are and using them to belong to and in the service of something larger than you are. And if technology can in the next decade or two increase the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life, it will be good enough. If entertainment can be diverted to also increase positive emotion, meaning, eudaimonia, it will be good enough. And if design can increase positive emotion, eudaimonia and flow and meaning, what we're all doing together will become good enough. Thank you.